Everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is Right Angle. And we talk about a lot of bad news on this show. It's the nature of this business. So today, I would like to talk to you about two fine, upstanding gentlemen, Jeffrey Toobin and Hunter Biden. Oh, what the hell? We got to rake through the muck once again. So let's get started. Scott, I want to start with you. I don't want to get so much into the specifics of what Jeffrey Toobin did.
Thank you.
This time, because I think we've had our fill of exactly how a Zoom conference works and doesn't work.
Why don't you just let the people know the basics, Steve?
The basics were he writes for The Atlantic, the left-wing magazine, and he and some fellow journalists from The Atlantic were doing a mock election online via Zoom, and what they would do in case of they were wargaming basic various awful scenarios for what happens if the election has to go to Congress, to the Supreme Court, all of these things. Jeffrey Toobin was play acting the role of the Supreme Court, and he felt it necessary to stroke his gavel and on camera. And I think we're just going to leave it at that.
As Supreme Court justices are wont to do.
Yeah. And if you know anything about Zoom, it's impossible to know that when you are on camera. It shows everything. When you pause yourself.
Not know.
Yes,
it's not an accident.
Blacks out everything. So this guy was making some really sick power play at work by doing what he was doing in front of his coworkers, and anybody else he would have just been fired. Instead, he got suspended, and CNN didn't even do that much. CNN let him come to them and voluntarily suspend himself, which, well. Anyway, the thing is, Toobin should never have been in this position in the first place because, Scott, I don't know if you're aware of this, but years ago, while he was married to his high school sweetheart and the father of two, and in his 40s, he impregnated the 20-something daughter of his colleague, Jeff Greenfield from CNN. Or actually, I think he's from CBS News. My mistake. When she came to him with this issue, he said he wasn't going to provide any kind of support, so she'd better get an abortion. When she refused, he refused. It all went to court. He even refused to pay after the judgment. They said they garnish his wages. He finally agreed to pay child support after all of that. And Scott, I submit to you that somebody who would do all of that had no business anywhere near the public life to do what he did this week. What say you?
Well, the fundamental question here is there any sense of shame in Jeffrey Toobin? And after doing what he did on camera in this Zoom video conference, and I guess if I were his attorney, I would make the defense that this doesn't escalate to the level that would require shame. After all, the man's been practicing law and appearing on CNN for years. So why would this be at a higher level of shame? It's embarrassing for the country in a sense. It's like we don't want to know about Jeffrey Toobin's personal peccadillos, and we don't want to. Clearly, we don't want to see the video, which I'm sure somebody has captured. If he had any sense and if he had any shame, with all his money, ill-gotten gains from his law career and his appearances on CNN, he would have gone off to a private island somewhere in the Pacific and waited for 5 or 10 years until people forgot his name.
You made me think about CNN, which for the last 4 years has been masturbating in public over anti-Donald Trump conspiracy theories. So this is really just par for the course for them. Bill, our other subject is Hunter Biden. And again, I don't want to talk about the specifics too terribly much about what we found out last week. But if the evidence is true and the Biden campaign hasn't denied any of it, not only does he have a serious drug problem, which we knew about, not only does he have a serious corruption problem, which we knew about, but we're also finding out just how deeply involved Joe Biden was, both as a dad and as a sitting vice president, in his own son's very public corruption, taking millions from Beijing, from Burisma, and all the rest. But, again, we have a case where Hunter Biden is the symptom of the disease, and the disease is Joe Biden, his enabling father. But Joe Biden himself is just a symptom of the corruption in Washington. This guy was laughed off the national stage the first time in 1987 when I was an 18-year-old college freshman. I'm now 51 years old, for plagiarism. And now he's making his third run for the president. I think Scott's nailed it, Bill. We've lost our sense of shame and our ability to shame these corruptocrats out of public life, haven't we? Yeah,
this is the end result of situational ethics. This is what you end up with. This is the political class you end up with. This is the class of people who determine what we see, what we get to know, and how we get to know it. Yeah. The two are related. You've got, I mean, in the first case, you've got a guy who is morally reprehensible individual lecturing Americans on morals. Isn't he the guy who tweeted 40% of Republican nominees to the Supreme Court have a credible record of sexual abuse towards women? Which is quite a statement coming from a pervert like that. Yeah. And perverts like that are in positions of power, and they determine what we know about what we know, and we allow it. And the same thing is true for Hunter. There've been stories about, well, Hunter's, taking advantage of the fact that he's just a, poor guy who's on, drugs. There's a lot of people out there on drugs, and a lot of people out there need help. But their fathers are not the vice president of the United States, and their fathers don't have the power to call the Ukrainian president and say, you either stop investigating my son and take this investigator off the case, or else you don't get your $1 billion. That's not the kind of influence that most people's fathers are able to throw around. So since we're trying to stay on topic here, shame is a social tool. Maybe call it a weapon if you want to, and it is designed to enforce moral behavior. It's a two-sided sword. It works against you from the outside, and if you have, it's quaintly called a soul, it works against you from the inside as well. Shame is there, and it's built into us in order to prevent us from doing bad things and doing bad things that we know are bad at the time. That's the essence of shame, I think. You can't really be ashamed of doing something wrong if you didn't know you were doing something wrong at the time you did something wrong. That's something, and maybe that might be guilt or something, but shame is predicated on the idea that you are aware that you are transgressing against civilizational norms of good behavior, and you're doing it anyway. And whether you get caught or not, what we find is that people without a moral core only feel shame when they're caught. People with a moral core feel shame about things that they've done wrong, whether anybody saw them do it or not. That this is an internal judge. Those people are relatively healthy individuals. But then you get to a whole class of people and a whole society. When you have an entire class, Steve, an entire elite class of people that are all closely related by blood and connections, but mostly related by their belief that they're smarter than everybody else. And these people make up the media, they make up the political class, they make up big tech. When you have a group of people that are all convinced that they're smarter than other people and better than other people, and none of them have a sense of shame because their entire moral code is predicated on what is good for them at the time, then everything that passes through that filter is going to be tainted downstream, which is why we live in a society that is this coarse and this divided. This has a lot to do with actually both of the segments I'm going to be talking about on Right Angle this week. But yes, if shame disappears, then there is no policeman to guard against immoral behaviors, and that's a philosophical term. Destructive behaviors that are bad for society, that are bad for the people in society, and that cause a society to become a terrible place to live.
And Bill, can I just add to, and I know you were saying this, but I just want to explicitly say this. Yes, shame works against you from without and from within, but it's really working for you. The purpose of shame is to drive you to repentance and good behavior, so to speak. It is to turn you away from the things that are harmful to yourself and to others.
That's correct. That's why it's a policeman. It is somebody who will, shame is something that should arrest you and throw you in jail and give you a shock and a moment of reflection to prevent you from doing this again. And if you don't have that guard on duty, Steve, then nothing is outside of your purview. And it should tell you a great deal about not only this individual, but also about the agency that hires him, that he was not immediately fired, and a statement issued saying that we are unaware of this behavior, we do not condone it, and we won't condone it. The fact that they didn't do that tells you how much shame there is in his organization.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, folks, I was going to finish more generally, but we've got an election coming up here in less than 2 weeks, and I will focus specifically here on Joe Biden. If I remember correctly, he had to bury his wife and young daughter and almost lost both of his sons in a car accident in the early 70s, 1971 or 72. He lost one of his surviving sons from that accident a few years ago to brain cancer. And as far as I can recall, Hunter Biden is his only surviving son. And I think he's got another daughter through his current wife, Jill Biden. I'm sorry, Dr. Jill Biden. Giving an idea of how corrupt Joe is, if the text messages we're seeing is true, he's using his children, especially Hunter, to make himself rich. Half of Hunter's ill-gotten gains go to Joe. That's why Joe has the giant house while still insisting that he's middle-class Joe from Scranton, Pennsylvania. But not only is he using his own children to enrich himself, his son, Hunter, has a serious problem with drug addiction. And these millions that Hunter gets from his official corruption enable his continued drug addiction. He's never going to bottom out and find his way back up as long as he's making all of these millions of dollars that his father enables him to do. This guy, Hunter Biden, this poor soul, is going to kill himself with drugs. And it's his own father, who's already buried 2 of his own children, who's enabling his son's slow motion suicide. That's the kind of man Joe Biden is. You can't vote for him in November. I'm Steve Green for Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. This is Right Angle.